The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Bernardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Bernardo had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Every child knew about the Sky Ripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Bernardo wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the Earth? It was more than Bernardo could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it. As he set foot on the island, Bernardo couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Bernardo felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. The sky... As he set foot on the island, Bernardo couldn't help feeling... The new pathway made Renato curious. That had been his mistake before, thinking he could win a battle of wills with an ancient evil all by himself. He had to be cleverer than that, or braver, or something. Take a leap of faith, said the inscription. Why would anyone put his slinky collection in a strongbox, thought Renato. Are they magic slinkies? Oh, and there was something else. Ha! Bet you never saw that coming.
Like the world's deadliest bone right by his side. Renato chuckled. It was the same puzzle. He wished he had his friends here, so he could amaze them. There it was. Skyripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Skyripper had a heart, a core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Asked himself why he changed course to confront Zenobia. He'd no idea. Sometimes he would just do things, and he could never figure out why he'd done them. Usually, they worked out. After all, he was a hero. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy. All right, maybe he should stop pretending. He knew exactly how she felt about him. But their love affair always ended with a tragic death. Unless, maybe he could find a way to dodge tragedy. Surely he could, couldn't he? The city was burning, and there was no one to put out the fires. If somehow Zenobia survived her father and inherited his crown, what sort of empire would she be heir to? But he couldn't think about that, could he? On the device and let it do all the killing for him. But that wouldn't be sporting, would it? Or fun.
how could you convince a firewall you're its friend? If he ever had a castle, he was going to hide his stuff better. Couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? What's behind door number 2? Well, the eyes have had it. Renato wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous. These streets were familiar. The Swordfu School was closed now, but he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Zenobia had chosen to invade this island herself. Like having a pet. Well, like having a goggler for a pet.
Snack time, boys!
Caught the lead, Raven.
Reynardo slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed. Oh, he'd forgotten how beautiful she was. How sleek, how soft. He tapped her on the shoulder with his sword. She vanished. And he suddenly noticed he couldn't move except his mouth. In fact, soon he couldn't keep his mouth shut. He told Zenobia everything. Sky River, the Iblastone, even where the secret rebel base was, until he was hoarse. It was some kind of truth spell. A talky truth spell. She called her father by Farspeaker Toad and filled His Majesty in.
But why didn't he get the core?
Croaked the Farspeaker in something like His Majesty's croak. Because I missed you, darling. Reynardo grinned. He doesn't even know why, frowned Zenobia.
That makes no sense. It's a trap,
shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Reynardo came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father. Doing? Asked Zenobia. Did you ever wonder why the Emperor adopted you? He asked her. She shook her head. He told her. His Majesty wanted to bring the lost gods back. They could make him an eater of souls, an immortal. But to seal his bargain with them, he needed a sacrifice. Someone who truly loved him. She was stunned. Furious. You're lying. Under a true spell? It's a trick. You can't prove that. Take me to the observatory, and I will. What kind of proof could you possibly have? She said as they landed on the Nexus. Your father ritually sacrificed a village, and he left witnesses? The scientists resurrected one. Well, it's not really alive, but it can talk. A true witness. She frowned. The dead can't lie. Well, I bet they could. They just don't have any reason to. She nodded grimly. You go on ahead. I don't want the ravens to see me. He was more and more extraordinary.
Had that door been opened before?
Weapon he'd ever used. Or not.
She caught up with him. Don't you think I'd know if my father wanted to invoke the Lost Gods? Would he tell you? No. Would you help him? No. I'd burn his books. Why'd he adopt a stray cat? You don't ask a thing like that. No? Not when there's no good answer, she said, her whiskers twitching. With all the secrets he revealed to the Emperor, the Ravens were probably heading for the secret base. Renata began to wonder if there would be anyone left to save. if Zenobia changed sides. This was definitely better than pulling yourself up in a bucket. The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists and black feathers everywhere. The ravens had burned the reanimated witness to cinders. Renato was stunned. There goes my proof. These were scientists, not rebels, Zenobia said, upset. Why would he do this? I don't know. Let's go to the fleet and ask him. Yes. I'll meet you on the mountains. There's something I have to get first. But could he afford to meet her in the mountains? He'd given the Empire the location of the secret rebel base. They would need rescuing. Was he going to meet up with her? Wasn't it more important to rescue the Rebel Council from the almost certain Imperial attack? Why was he in this war anyway? Was it really to fight the good fight, or did he just want to see her again? One of these days, Renato thought, I should really figure out my motives before I pounce. Nah. Was it true? Was he on this adventure just to see Zenobia again? The Imperial heir was not an easy cat to see. Well, she'd ignored all his Kwanzaa gifts. And on the other paw, trying to get a date by joining a war against your intended was, let's say, pretty optimistic. But on the back paw, thought Renato, yes, it sounded exactly like him. Good. I'm so glad we had this little chat, he told himself.
You shall not pass!
This thing really needed a roof. There were a lot of dead ravens along the side of the road. Someone had rampaged through here on a killing spree. What had Zenobia gone to get? He had a chilling feeling it was the Iblis stone. Zenobia was level-headed. A stone would make anyone bloodthirsty. You could tell her style from the blade work on the dead birds. How we do it, said Renato to himself. Velocity. Renato wondered what he should do when he found Zenobia. What could he do if she had the Iblis stone? He reached the summit, expecting no one. But there she was, steaming, pacing.
I'm gonna kill him, she said. I'm gonna kill all his ravens, and then him, and then his family, and all the eggs and tadpoles. And then I'm gonna burn down their pond.
Did you go and get the Iblis stone?
You see, all these ravens I killed. So much power.
Yeah. Great, Renato said.
You really want power from a demonic rock? You want the stone, don't you?
Not really.
Good. I'd rather not have to kill you.
He told her he loved her, that he wouldn't let the Iblis stone take her, even if he had to die for it.
Well, he planned to tell her. Now didn't seem like the right time. She'd probably cool off in a bit. So he let her get in her ship and fly off.
He rushed back to the Farfarer and followed her, keeping a healthy distance.
Zenobia's ship was just visible through the clouds ahead. How could he reason with her? But he had to. The rebels were down for the count. No wonder. He'd betrayed the location of their base and then he'd abandoned them. And if she became Empress while she was in the grip of the Iblis stone, if she became Empress by murdering her father, she could still be a great Empress. But she could also be a nightmare Empress.
She had to be stopped.
There were more dead ravens along his path, some of them wounded in the back. He knew she could have easily talked her way past them, or clouded the little tiny raven brains with a spell. She was going out of her way to kill everything in her path. This wasn't Zenobia, not as he knew her.
The portal was heavily guarded. It must go someplace they really didn't want it to go. Renato wondered if it wasn't cheaper to build bridges and stairs.
So, his beloved was possessed by the spirit of a demon. That's what it meant to be a hero. To brave the darkness in your loved one's soul. To have faith there was still good in her. To help her out of that darkness, no matter what the cost. But what? What could he do? She'd kill him if he tried to take the Iblis stone from her.
this device, you can travel at night, so long as there are ravens set on fire.
At the end of the trail of raven corpses was Zenobia. Her father was frantically rigging a strange apparatus wrapped around a glowing core. "Don't do it!" he shouted. "You'll hate yourself in the morning! Stay back!" she screamed in a horrible voice he'd never heard before. It froze him in his tracks. The Emperor stared at him. "Run!" he told the toad. "Or hop!" But he didn't manage to voice it, only think it. Zenobia stabbed her blade forward, and His Majesty fell dead. She began laughing hysterically. Or was she weeping? "Just walk away," she laughed at him. "I've no more use for you." There was something he needed to do, but he couldn't figure out what it was. So he did as he was told. As he walked away, he felt a chill in the world. The light in the sky seemed to dim. He didn't dare turn. He had a nagging feeling there was something he should have done just then. Something heroic. But he could not have taken the Iblis stone from her by force, and she would not have parted with it willingly. A cold wind blew from where she had been, but he still didn't dare turn. And then, an awful laughter filled the air, and all the torches and all the ships went out, and he realized what he should have done. But by then, it was too late to do anything. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas, It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage.
The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Bernardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it. Could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage. Every child knew about the... As he set foot on the island, Renato couldn't help feeling a bit curious. Was Lapino still waiting to be rescued? No. He was probably drinking champagne with the ravens. Did ravens drink champagne? Did rabbits? Renato felt oddly thirsty, come to think of it. Why had he chosen the Sky Ripper?
Renato never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Sky Ripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it?
These things really slice like ham.
The people who had built this castle, did they even know what monstrous weapon lay hidden within their walls? The Sky Ripper could destroy anything it touched, or so the legend said. As the Transcendent Emperor had fought the Lost Gods, thousands of thousands had died. But Renato had been through wars. The only merciful war was a short one.
This was way better than being able to shrink down to the size of an ant. What was that all about, anyway? Story time. Of course, the lead Raven. Now we'll never find out how it ended. The contraption wasn't even trying anymore. As if it knew it had met its match. There it was. Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
The device, how was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart, a core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. Renato asked himself why he changed course to confront Zenobia. He'd no idea. Sometimes he would just do things. The truth is, though, he wanted to see her, wasn't it? It had been a dozen years since Swordfu School. He'd followed every rumor about her, every scrap of news. Not that he still loved her. After all, she was his enemy. No, it was solely because, know your enemy. All right, maybe he should stop pretending. He knew exactly how she felt about him. But their love affair always ended with a tragic death. Unless, maybe he could find a way to dodge a tragedy. Surely he could, couldn't he? This was the nice part of town, but the Ravens had been through here. They like to take shiny things home to their nests. You couldn't hack this kind of firewall. You had to warm it up to you. He couldn't do worse with Zenobia than he'd done with the core, could he? Who are you looking at? Oh, right. No one. Renato wasn't entirely sure how he was going to capture Zenobia. She'd be expecting him. And he didn't have Lapino to cook up a clever plan. Why was it again that he hadn't got the core? Maybe because the results tended to be disastrous.
These streets were familiar. The Swordfu School was closed now, but he had been down that street 1,000 times. He knew that pub. He knew that alley. He knew the alley behind it much too well. No wonder Zenobia had chosen to invade this island herself. Reynardo slinked through Zenobia's ship, making no sound at all. Where were her guards? Finally, he reached her bedroom. She was curled up on her bed.
That makes no sense. It's a trap,
Shouted the Emperor.
I'll meet you at the outpost, and I'll bring my interrogators.
If Reynardo came face to face with the Emperor, maybe he could assassinate him. But maybe it would be smarter and safer to turn Zenobia against her father.
You're lying, she said. Somehow you're lying. The spell hadn't worn off yet. He had to tell the truth.
The trick was in making sure she wouldn't believe it. The core is perfectly safe, he said. And he tried his hardest to sound sincere.
So is the Iblistone. In fact, I was trying to get them myself. Fine then, interrogators it is, she said angrily. I gave you a chance.
The Emperor's interrogators were not especially gentle, even by Weasel standards. Fortunately, Zenobia had locked him in the guest quarters on her ship, and she'd forgotten it had a toilet that, like all skyship toilets, could be vented into the abyss. This was not the sort of slippery fox he wanted to be. But just as they were about to land, he threw the latch, wrinkled his nose, and leapt through the open latrine. It was a short, safe landing. At least this part of the Nexus hadn't changed too much. Zenobia had been taking him to the Imperial outpost. She'd never expect him to go there by himself. Well, maybe she would. You never knew with her. Oh, this really didn't have much in the way of safety features, did it?
Okay, let's get this over with, and we can all go home.
Well, not you, just me. Bernardo knew Zenobia, and Zenobia knew him. She'd suspected a trick. Now he'd vanished. She would probably guess that was his plan all along. Perfect. Maybe she wouldn't use the Sky River. At least not without taking it to the scientists at the observatory first. Meanwhile, the Emperor would be coming to the outpost personally. This could be good. Giving the Emperor all of the rebellion's secrets hadn't been quite the disaster he'd thought. It had drawn the Emperor out of the safety of his fleet. Bernardo could sneak into the outpost, and in a few sword strokes, he could win the war. But the Emperor would be surrounded by his elite guard. Renato wondered if there was anything he could say that would confuse the old toad even more. Use words instead of his sword? Renato was face to face with the Emperor's bodyguard. They looked very tough, but the Emperor held them back.
Oh, where's my daughter?
And how would I know that? Renato grinned at him.
She lured me here so that you could kill me, didn't she?
Ah, don't be ridiculous, said Renato, trying his best to sound convincing. She loves you.
Oh, I knew it. The rabbit told me I couldn't trust her.
The Emperor hopped out the door. His phalanx of bodyguards retreated carefully. Renato heard someone call, "Arrest her!" as they left. Well, that's a job well done, thought Renato. Now the fleet would be in all sorts of disarray. But maybe he could find her in the mountains. She always used to go to the mountains to hide from the world. Maybe he could even turn her against her father. Or maybe he could reap the benefits of the chaos he had sown. It was time to report to the Rebel Council, and then launch the attack on a divided and very confused Imperial fleet. Renato was very proud of himself. He told the Empire everything, but now they didn't believe anything, and it looked like the Emperor didn't trust his daughter anymore either. There were some advantages to having a slippery reputation, weren't there? Renato wondered if he'd really fooled the Empire. He guessed he'd know soon enough. If the skies darkened with 1,000 dropships, then he'd know the Empire believed his map of the rebel base's secret location. They certainly seemed to be looking for it. There were ravens everywhere. But where weren't there ravens these days? He missed her. Not Zenobia. Hypatia, the kid's mother. Renato had never thought he'd date a librarian. He'd always figured himself for the barmaid type. But then, he'd never figured the library of Ubar would have comic books, or that Hypatia would know anything about them. He missed her. Maybe the Emperor would attack Zenobia. The Ravens, divided into two armies, would slaughter each other. And the rebellion could just show up and claim victory. The Council would be overjoyed that Renato had given away all their secrets. Imagine getting a horse up in one of these things. It would be cursing a blue streak. See? It was actually very fine weather.
except for the occasional shower of ravens. And no one was burning the ruins down with the mighty power of a god's eye. If the Empire believed anything he'd said, they certainly weren't showing it. Come on. One fox, no waiting.
"Say goodnight, Gracie," said Renato, wondering who Gracie was.
Long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. He was on fire. So far, so good.
As he told his hilarious adventures to the rebel council, he began to realize they weren't laughing. Just staring at him with those big bug eyes.
"Zenobia let you escape?"
Asked the speaker.
"How do we know you're not a double agent?"
Then I wouldn't tell you about her at all.
"Maybe you're trying to sound like an idiot, so we don't realize how clever you are,"
croaked the speaker. No, I promise you, I really am that much of an idiot. Renato was about to say when a half-dozen Imperial ships began to bomb the base.
"He's betrayed us!"
Croaked the toads, and Renato decided it would be good to be somewhere else.
He boarded the Farfarer and got out of there.
The wind ruffled Renato's fur the wrong way. So the rebels thought he was lying too? Because a half-dozen lousy dropships that probably just tripped over the rebel base? Okay, technically he had betrayed its location, but not willingly. And he'd made up for it, hadn't he? Then something exploded. A cannon shot. The Farfarer plunged out of the clouds. The rebels had hit his ship.
As the Farfarer plummeted towards the abyss, he launched himself into the sails of an Imperial ship. The Farfarer was gone. It had been a beautiful ship, and fast. It could do the Kestrel run in 12 furlongs, or so the salesman had told him.
He would show them. He would be the hero of the final battle. They'd know whose side he was on then. That's what it meant to be a hero. To go on fighting, even when both sides were trying to kill you.
A portal that led right into the middle of the fleet. It was a glaring weakness in the defense. The platform used a hybrid propulsion system fueled by anti-gravity and wishful thinking. Renata remembered when the Emperor had first come to the throne. He built universities and libraries. He used to invite scientists to dinner. What could have made that toad so afraid of death that he would risk bringing back the lost gods? Swan. Could he join up? He dyes his feathers.
See? Rebels were fighting ravens everywhere, and not a super weapon in sight. No one was summoning giant murder birds out of the clouds. There were no locusts, no rain of fire. Something blew up nearby, and Renato decided it was not time to stop and ponder. Just as well, he liked acting much better than pondering. Renato reached the Emperor's ship, and there he saw a strange sight. Zenobia being led in shackles by Lapino with a squad of ravens. What? Lapino was working with the ravens? Was he some sort of traitor? Of course Lapino was working with the ravens. But the Emperor still thought Zenobia was a traitor? Renato felt oddly bad about that. Should he run down there and rescue her? Oh, but she was the enemy. Then he heard a whistling sound. He looked straight up and saw a rebel ship. It was dropping rather large bombs. One of them kept getting bigger as it fell. Huh? Oh.
The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer.
Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Iblis stone was hidden there. It was a dangerous artifact. It could corrupt its user into a bloodthirsty monster. Maybe he could find a way to use it, to take its power without surrendering to its wickedness. And also, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Of course, Renato had a pretty strong suspicion that Lapino had betrayed the rebellion, and he had a gut feeling that he needed to use that to his advantage.